Welcome back to part 9 of our series where we are building a Python trading robot for the TD Ameritrade API. We are pretty much, I would say, well into the trade object. So at this point, we are now taking our robot and we are building the trade object that will naturally go along with it. And so the idea behind the trade object is one, we want to be able to submit orders. We want to be able to build orders. So everything's really related to orders. And then naturally, this will be an easy way, at least for in the beginning, simple orders to modify and add different components to them. So continuing on, we are now going to talk about a few other methods that we would like to add to our particular trade object. The next one is going to be called define, well, actually not that far indented, add stop loss. Now, this should be kind of self-explanatory, but the idea behind this one is that the stop loss, add stop loss, will add a stop loss to our order. So what that means is, say you have a buy order, what you can then do is define this method and it will basically make a stop loss that will protect your order once you purchase it, right? So we'll say, okay, you buy it, but if it goes below this price, we're gonna sell it for you. So that's the intent of adding this method, is making that process easier. Additionally, we'll take two arguments. One is the stop size. So this is saying, hey, what is the numeric value of my stop? And then the other one is gonna say, okay, well, I have a numeric value. Is that a percentage value or is it an absolute number value? Regardless of what it is, that will then help us say, okay, when we're constructing this stop loss, we now know what to tell the order and say, hey, he's really meaning a percentage value. And so because of that, this is what you need to add through as your argument. So that's really the idea behind it. And then it's turn a Boolean. Couple things we have to make sure, and this is pretty much for all of them. If not self, self trigger added, then what we have to do is we're going to say, okay, well, we're going to add a self.convert to trigger. So all of this stuff has to include a trigger order. So anytime we're adding a stop loss or we're adding a take profit, we have to add a trigger order that goes along with it. So that way we can have multiple components to it and it's not just a single order. So if self.orderType equals market, so okay, we now know it's a market order, then right now I kind of have myself a little placeholder, but what we would be doing is we would actually be making a call to get quotes. And so when we make that call to get quotes, we're going to get the current price. With that current price, we will then set that like a certain percentage away based on the value that's put in there. So that one's kind of technically a placeholder right now. The next one is self.orderType equals limit. Then what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, well, the self.price equals the price. And then next, if percentage, so if they say it's a percentage, then we're going to say, okay, well, the adjustment or the size, I mean, I guess the size of the stop is going to be 1.0 minus the stop size. And then the other one is, why did I make my life so complicated by writing that? But okay, let's do it anyway. Then we're going to say, is that indented or not? I think that's indented. So we're going to say the new price equals self. We're going to have another method. It's going to be calculate new price. That will be the price that we're going to pass through. And then it's going to be the adjustment, which will also be that. And then we're going to say percentage equals true. So this is where stuff really gets complicated. And this is normally where I get questions about, can we adjust that? Can we adjust that? I have to be very specific sometimes about where and where I cannot adjust, or the complexities of adding an adjustment. So part of it is I have to make it general. I can't just make it because I want to use it or somebody specifically wants to use it. I have to make it general in the sense of multiple people can use it. And so sometimes what the drawback is, I throw more back to your direction, which is I'm not going to be able to calculate everything for you, but I can try to calculate some things for you. So the idea here is I'm going to calculate that stop price using the stop size if it's a percentage component. And then from there, we have all that stuff. So that's why you're also seeing some stuff has technically placeholders right now, because I have to build in that logic that says, hey, if it's a market order, they're not going to have a price with it. So I have to grab that price for them, which at that point I can then use to calculate that new stop price. So this is really where things can kind of get complicated, just because I have to write it in such a way where things are flexible. And then we're going to have a new price equals self, and then calculate new price equals price, and then adjustment equals adjustment. And then guess what? The percentage will equal false. So that's all that. And then from here, we're going to have our stop loss order. So this is where things get fun. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to open up another one that I already have open, and I will add that in here for us just to give myself a little bit of a break and not have to run too many stuff. This one. Yeah, I personally, the one I really hate doing is the order one. This one it drives me crazy just trying to work through the logic sometimes, because it's not, you really have to sit back sometimes and like take it step by step by step. So yeah, this is one where I get a little frustrated sometimes, because it's like sometimes I feel like I make headway and then I'm like, no, I didn't make headway, and it's all sorts of stuff that I don't like really doing. This isn't the right one, is it? Nope. There we go. So out of all the objects, this is probably one I hate writing the most, because it's just so messy. Okay, so we're going to calculate a new price. That new price is either going to be a percentage or it's going to be an absolute value. So that means you're giving me a stop. That stop, I'm going to say, okay, well, if it's a market order, well, the first question I have to do is I got to get the price. If it's a limit order, well, luckily I already have that price, so that's pretty easy to get. Regardless, though, what I'm going to do is build in some stuff where we can then bring it in. The other challenge, which is going to be even more complicated, which is this. I'm going to also have to build in logic that says, well, even though we got the quote maybe 2 minutes ago, we're going to have to refresh that quote when he actually submits the order. So this is not going to be easy, because the problem is, even if you predefine your order, it's going to use the price at that point in time. Most people aren't going to want that. So my other option is I can specifically ask the user, A, do you want to give me a price? So if you want to give me a price, then, hey, I'll take it. That's probably easier. Or B, I'll have probably some type of flag that says check, or whatever it is that says, hey, if it's a market order, you need to check it before you submit it. So what it's going to do is it's going to refresh that price. And then ideally too, that maybe could be something where it lets the user know, hey, the order you're trying to submit doesn't make a lot of sense. You're saying your stop order is going to be this, but it might not, make a lot of sense. So again, these ones right here, there's work to be on it. So they're not going to be perfect from the get-go, but I want to start talking through that logic with people so they understand what is the goal and what are we trying to do with these types of orders. So keep an eye out on these ones. They will be changing, but just keep an eye out for them. So what we're going to do then is we're going to say, okay, we have our stop loss order. We'll store it as an attribute just to make our lives easier down the road. And then from here, we're going to say, okay, take the order, and then keep in mind it's now a trigger order. We're going to say, okay, add it to the child order strategies. And then what we're going to say is that one's going to be append. self.stop-loss order. Okay, and then return true. And there you go. That's your stop-loss order. All we're doing is we're trying to make the process of adding a stop-loss easier by, instead of asking for an entire order, I'm just asking for like 3 pieces of information. And then based on that, we can kind of calculate some of that stuff for you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this. No, I'm not going to copy that because I think it's going to be too complicated if I do it. We're going on to the next one, which is stop limit order. Ooh, even gets better. So with the stop limit, we're still going to have a stop size, and then that will be a float. We're going to have a limit size that will also be a float. We'll have a stop percentage, which will be a Boolean, and that will be initialized to false. So that would be the default value. And then we're going to have a limit percentage, and that will also be a Boolean, which will default to false if you don't give me anything. And then finally, this will also return a Boolean. So very similar to what we were doing up above. So in that case, we can now copy some of this logic and we'll just talk through it a little bit more. So it's still going to have to be a trigger order, and this is something important. You might be going, Alex, why do you keep making it a trigger order? Guess what? You want to have a stop loss that's attached to your main order, you have to make that a trigger order. You're saying, hey, when this one happens, so when you submit your buy order, that will trigger the execution of your other, we'll call them protective orders, right? So very, very important that you understand that, because it can confuse people a little bit when they're looking at it. They're going, why is he doing it like that? There's always a reason. First things first is we're going to take and change that to a stop percentage. So we're going to basically do what we just did up above. So this is really our stop percentage component. And then from here, we still have our price. Everything is still fine. The only thing that is changing is nothing. Nothing. Okay, nothing. Perfect. And then I'm going to copy this a little bit more, and I want you to guess. What do you think we're going to do here? We did one for the stop. Naturally, we should be doing something for the limit. So now we have to get our limit adjustment, So this one will be our limit size. So that's very important too, very important. So the only challenging part here that still has to kind of be thought through a little bit, so I'm going to warn you, this is changing still, is the price. Now, technically, I think it's still going to be the regular price. I think everything should be calculated off the price, but I might give the flexibility where, again, you would pass through 2 different prices if you want, or if you don't give me those prices, then I'm going to default to grabbing the current quote if and only if it's a market order. If it's a limit order, I ain't ever going to check. I'm going to take what you gave me initially, okay? So a limit, guess what? I'm always checking. Sorry, I'm not checking. If it's a market, well, I might check or I might not check. You got to tell me when to check. So again, keep in mind, these ones will change a little bit. The idea is making it flexible, but only when you want it to be, keeping it flexible, but if you want to be a little bit more explicit, then that option will be there. But you need to identify that, and you need to ask and say, hey, calculate it. Otherwise, I ain't calculating it. Then from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my other order that's right below it. And you'll see right here, it's almost the same identical logic. In fact, what I probably could do if I was really ambitious, I probably could make this even easier. So, you have to kind of walk through it a little bit and ask the simple questions. Oh, and then sorry, I didn't change this. So this needs to be the limit price, and then these ones need to be the stop price. So you can kind of see I'm just filling in this order. So I still have a stop limit order. Again, I'm still doing kind of what I was doing up above, but all I'm doing now is I'm just constructing it using a pre-built template. And then again, at some point, if you really wanted to, you could always go directly back into this attribute and you could physically modify this. So this is also a very good point to highlight, which is at the end of the day, you have control of it. If you don't like the way I was calculating something, by all means, go out and fix it. I would never be offended by that. In fact, I would encourage you to do that. So it's important to know you always have access to that order. It's never restricted and it's never locked away from you where you can't ever touch it. You just need to know where it would be stored. And so in this case, if you did decide to add a stop limit order, well, guess what? Then you just go to your stop limit order attribute and you could always modify it if you want. So that's your stop limit. This is your stop loss. We're going to now go on to calculating a new price. What am I doing here? Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to go on to the calculating the new price. Then we're going to talk about a take profit. And then we're going to talk about convert to trigger. So fun, right? And then I'll probably do a little bit of a recap just because, again, I don't know. For me, this particular object just drives me mad. And if I find it confusing, I kind of go, other people must find it confusing, I assume. So we've obviously seen multiple times we have to calculate a new price because we're going to either have these limit prices or these stop prices and all this other stuff. That means some calculation has to be done behind the scenes. So the calculate new price private method, denoted by a little underscore, is designed to do just that. It's going to do all those calculations for you, but it's going to do it in an easier way. Now, as a user, you should never have to touch this. But if this is something where you'd like to modify this library a little bit and maybe add your own little touch to it, then it's good to know what this is going to be doing for you. And so this one will calculate those new prices. It should always return back a float. So that's the new price or the new percentage, whatever you want to call it. And so with this one, as I move my notes, the first thing I need to ask is, well, is it a percentage? If it's a percentage, well, guess what? That new price equals the price that was given to me times the adjustment. So imagine for a second that this is $1, and I say, you know what? I need 10% of that dollar. Okay, well, that adjustment would represent that 10%. So my new price would be 10 cents. Now you gotta kind of keep in mind here, this is a little bit cheating a little bit. Maybe should I really call it a new price or should I call it an offset? You probably could call it many different things. But at this point, let's just talk through it a little bit and we'll see. So if it's a percentage, I'm always gonna take a percentage of that total. Otherwise, it's gonna be very straightforward. I'm gonna take that price and I'm simply going to add my adjustment, or we'll also call it an offset. So we'll have our numeric offset and it's either a percentage of it or it's a absolute value of it as well. So very important to understand. Again, this is always kind of our denoted one down. And then from here, if the new price is less than 1, then we have to make sure our new price is rounded. So this is something too, a lot of people don't know this. When you pass through something to TD Ameritrade, you need to make sure it's rounded. That means 4 decimal places and only 4 decimal places. You can do 3, you can do 2, you can do 1. You do 5, you will get an error every time. So very important. Anytime you put through a price, it needs to be rounded if it's below $1. Additionally, if it is above a single whole dollar, guess what? That also has to be rounded. And in that case, it can only be 2 decimal places, only 2. If it's more than 2, it will return an error every single time. So very important that you understand, and this is just general using the API as a whole, you need to make sure things around it. Because a lot of times I will get questions from people and they're like, it's not taking my order. It's not taking my order. Why is it not taking my order? And after a little bit of digging, we kind of conclude it's like, wait a minute, you calculated this really like small number and it's got like 20 decimal places, and the API is always sending back an error on that. So that is definitely one of the trickier ones there. So don't beat yourself up if that happens to you. It happens to everybody. It happened to me God knows how many times, but don't let it get in the way of you making your orders, because it's frustrating and it's sometimes hard to identify. All righty. How many minutes are we in? Ooh, more than enough. Okay, so I'm going to cut the video here. In our next video, we're going to do our take profit. We're going to do our convert to trigger. And then I think we have just a couple little things here and there. These are more or less with building the order and more just kind of, I would say, paperwork stuff. So, making sure we can easily count or get information and stuff like that. So nothing too crazy. And I'm hoping I can get everything done in the next video. And then in the video after that, very important, we will actually start running our robot. So I did this all kind of, I didn't realize I was doing it this way, but I was making it where now on Monday we can do it. So if you have any questions, by all means, ask away. If you'd like any clarification about this, I'm always open to hearing about it. If you have suggestions, please, for the love of God, share them. I would say though, if you do want to suggest maybe kind of building some of this stuff, keep that on GitHub, just because that way it's easier to, if you guys want to suggest changes or something like that, it's easier to just take it from GitHub and push it in rather than going on YouTube and trying to get all that stuff messed up. So yeah, I mean, if you have a better way of doing this, I am all open to hearing this one, because I think it definitely could be improved, and I'd be curious to see what people come up with. So thank you again for watching, everybody. We will see you in video number 10.